Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly wild story. We're looking at how a single and initially super fragmented institution somehow gained the immense power to steer the entire US economy. So, if you've ever wondered why global financial markets literally hang on every single word spoken by the chair of the Federal Reserve, well, you're in exactly the right place. Let's get into it. A former Fed chairman once nailed the description of their job. He called the Fed the economy chaperone who was ordered the punch bowl removed just when the party was really warming up. Think about that for a second. When the economy is absolutely booming, people are spending, things are great, inflation can start to overheat. So the Fed's deeply unpopular but absolutely vital job is to step in, raise interest rates, and cool things down before that party turns into a total disaster. Now, contrast that very highbrow classic quote with this modern internet masterpiece from 2020. Money printer go burr. It's hilarious, sure, but it hits the nail on the head regarding a very real power the Fed has. See, while the Treasury prints the physical paper bills, it's actually the Federal Reserve that distributes them and manages the overall money supply. During massive financial stress, they can essentially create money out of thin air to keep the whole system from freezing up. Okay, moving into Section 1, panics and the Fed's birth. Now, the Fed didn't just magically appear out of nowhere. Back in the early 1900s, bank runs were terrifyingly common. If your bank went under, your money was just gone. Poof. After a huge, devastating panic in 1907, ultra-wealthy bankers, guys like J.P. Morgan, actually had to step in with their own personal cash to bail out the system. Obviously, leaders quickly realized that crossing our fingers and relying on a few billionaires during a crisis is a terrible way to run a modern economy, and that realization led directly to the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913. But at first, there was this massive, deep-seated national distrust of handing all that power to one single bank in Washington or New York. People absolutely hated the idea. So they decentralized it. They split it into 12 regional banks across the country. Fun little fact here, they actually gave the state of Missouri 2 banks just because an influential local senator demanded it. Crazy, right? But when the Great Depression hit, this decentralized setup proved totally fatal. Basically, nobody was truly in charge, and all that fragmented bickering and inaction actually made the Depression so much worse. So, to fix that glaring flaw, Congress centralized power in 1935, creating a Washington-based board of governors. You can think of them almost like Supreme Court justices, but for the economy. They combined this board with 5 regional bank presidents, always including the one from New York, by the way, to form what we call the Federal Open Market Committee, or the FOMC. Fast forward to today, and this combined group is the ultimate decision-making body. They're the ones who sit around a table and set the interest rates that directly impact your wallet. All right, Section 2, Fighting the Great Inflation. In 1978, Congress handed the Fed what is now famous as the dual mandate. Basically, it's a legal directive forcing the Fed to focus on 2 massive things at the exact same time: stable prices and maximum employment. But here is the catch, and it's a huge one. These 2 goals almost always conflict. If you need to crush inflation, you usually have to hike interest rates. But doing that slows businesses down, which then causes unemployment to rise. It's just a massive, incredibly high-stakes balancing act. And wow, was a balancing act desperately needed back then. By the late 1970s, inflation had absolutely skyrocketed to nearly 15%. Part of this was just bad luck, but a lot of it was really bad policy. It's widely understood now that earlier in the decade, Fed Chair Arthur Burns actually caved to political pressure from President Nixon. He kept interest rates artificially low right before the 1972 election to keep the economy looking good. The harsh, undeniable lesson we learned: keeping everyday politics completely out of the boardroom is absolutely essential for our economic survival. Then, in 1979, a fiercely independent guy named Paul Volcker took the reins. To kill that monstrous 15% inflation, he took some seriously drastic and incredibly painful action. He hiked interest rates all the way up to nearly 20%. 20%. Naturally, unemployment shot up to over 10%. It was a brutal, brutal time for the everyday American worker. And the public outrage? It was visceral. Homebuilders who were totally paralyzed by these impossibly expensive mortgages literally mailed 2x4 wooden boards to the Fed in protest. Everyday citizens mailed in unsold house keys, unused car keys. They were sending physical pieces of their ruined livelihoods directly to Washington. Farmers even blockaded the Fed's headquarters with their tractors. But as painful as it was, history totally vindicated Volcker. Making that wildly unpopular choice eventually killed the inflation and set the US economy up for 30 solid years of dominant growth. Really, that whole era is what forged the Fed's modern credibility. Moving on to Section 3, the modern crisis playbook. So when the terrifying 2008 financial crisis arrived, Fed Chair Ben Bernanke was absolutely determined not to repeat those passive, disastrous mistakes of the Great Depression. He went all in and deployed this bold new playbook. Step 1, drop interest rates to near zero. Step 2, loan massive, unprecedented amounts of money to non-banks. And Step 3, push into completely new markets. By buying up assets like mortgage securities, the Fed essentially forced cash directly into a financial system that was rapidly freezing to death. And because Congress largely backed away from major government spending after 2009, they left this massive vacuum. The Fed had to step up, effectively becoming, as they say, the only game in town. If the economy needed a jolt, it fell entirely on the Fed's monetary policy. This dynamic is exactly why, even today, global financial markets obsessively analyze every single subtle shift in tone from the Fed chair. We saw this exact same dynamic play out again in 2020. When the global shutdown struck, the Fed didn't even blink. They just dusted off Bernanke's 2008 playbook, bought up those same assets, and drastically expanded the money in circulation. They literally brought that money printer meme from the beginning of our explainer to life. In a severe national emergency, they proved, without a doubt, that they are willing to act as the ultimate financial stopgap to hold the entire system together. Which brings us to our final part, Section 4, who controls the economy? This constant evolution, going from a simple bank for banks back in 1913, all the way to becoming the ultimate financial stopgap we see today, brings us to a really critical question. To wrap up this explainer, I want you to ponder this. Are we too reliant on a handful of unelected officials acting as the economy's chaperone? Now, their independence is exactly what allows them to make those vital, painfully unpopular decisions. But have our elected leaders in Congress simply surrendered their own responsibilities just because it's so much easier to let the unelected chaperone take away the punch bowl? It's a fundamental question about how our democracy works. And honestly, the answer is going to define our economic future. Just something to think about the next time you hear the Fed is tweaking interest rates.